Federal agents, open this door immediately.
Do you have a warrant? You can't just demand entry into my home.
We don't need a warrant. We have authority under immigration enforcement. Open up or we're coming in.
I'm a U.S. citizen. My family are citizens. You absolutely need a warrant. I'm calling my lawyer right now.
Got 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1.
The sound of splintering wood echoed through the suburban Denver neighborhood at 10:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in May, captured in perfect clarity by the Ring doorbell camera that Natalie Pierce had installed 6 months earlier after a string of package thefts. She'd never imagined that camera would record 4 federal agents breaking down her front door, storming into her home where her 2 teenage daughters were doing homework, and conducting a warrantless search based on nothing more than an anonymous tip that would later be proven completely false. The footage would become the centerpiece of a lawsuit that would shock the nation and result in one of the largest civil rights jury verdicts in Colorado history, $30 million awarded after a jury found federal agents liable for constitutional violations so egregious that even the government's attorneys struggled to mount a defense. This is the story of how a family's constitutional rights were shattered along with their front door, and how video evidence would ensure that every second of that violation was preserved for a jury to witness. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Natalie Pierce had bought the house in the Montbello neighborhood of Denver 3 years earlier, a proud moment for a single mother who'd worked 2 jobs for a decade to save enough for a down payment. At 41, she was a registered nurse at Denver Health Medical Center, working the night shift in the emergency department while raising her 2 daughters, Jasmine, 16, and Kennedy, 14, on her own after her husband had died in a construction accident when the girls were young. The house was modest, but there's a 3-bedroom ranch with a small yard, on a quiet street where neighbors knew each other and kids still played outside. Natalie had painted every room herself, had planted flowers in the front garden, had created a home where her daughters felt safe. The Ring doorbell had been a practical purchase, a way to see who was at the door when she was sleeping during the day after her night shifts, a security measure that seemed prudent for a woman living alone with 2 teenagers. Tuesday, May 21, 2024 was supposed to be an ordinary day. Natalie had worked the previous night, a typical chaotic ER shift with 2 trauma cases and a steady stream of patients, and had gotten home at 8:15 a.m. She checked on the girls who were on summer break and sleeping in, had made herself breakfast, and had gone to bed around 9:30 a.m., exhausted from the 12-hour shift. Jasmine and Kennedy had woken up around 10 a.m., had eaten cereal while scrolling through their phones, and had settled at the dining room table to work on summer reading assignments their school had given them. The house was quiet, peaceful, filled with the normal sounds of a suburban morning, the hum of the refrigerator, birds outside the window, the occasional car passing on the street. At 10:45 a.m., the doorbell camera detected motion and began recording. 4 people in tactical vests marked icy approached the front door with the aggressive purposefulness of people on a mission. The lead agent, a white man in his late 30s named Agent Kyle Morrison, rang the doorbell twice in quick succession, the chimes loud enough to wake Natalie from her light sleep. Jasmine, sitting closest to the front door, looked up from her book confused. They weren't expecting anyone. She walked to the door and looked through the peephole, seeing 4 people in law enforcement gear. Her stomach tightened. Her mother had taught her to be careful with police, to always be respectful but to know her rights. "Who is it?" she called through the door, not opening it. "Federal agents." Morrison's voice came back, loud and authoritative. "We need to speak with the residents of this house. Open the door." Jasmine's younger sister Kennedy had joined her in the hallway, both girls now uncertain and scared. Our mom is sleeping. She worked last night. Can you come back later?" The doorbell camera captured Morrison's face, irritation replacing professional neutrality. "Open this door immediately. This is official federal business." Natalie, awakened by the doorbell and now the raised voices, stumbled out of her bedroom in sweatpants and a t-shirt, her hair still in the bonnet she wore to bed, her mind foggy from being woken after only an hour of sleep. "Girls, what's going on?" "Mom, there are federal agents at the door," Jasmine said, her voice shaking slightly. Natalie's nurse training kicked in. Stay calm, assess the situation, gather information. She approached the door but didn't open it, speaking through the heavy wood. "This is Natalie Pierce. I'm the homeowner. What is this about?" "Ma'am, we need to enter your residence. We have information that there may be undocumented individuals living here. Open the door now." Should federal agents be allowed to demand entry into private homes without warrants based on anonymous tips? Comment below, Because what happened in the next 60 seconds would violate every constitutional protection that Americans are supposed to have against government intrusion. Natalie's mind raced. Undocumented individuals? She was born in Denver. Her daughters were born in Denver. This had to be some kind of mistake. Do you have a warrant? You can't just demand entry into my home. The doorbell camera captured Morrison's response, his voice hardening. We don't need a warrant. We have authority under immigration enforcement. Open up or we're coming in. That's not true, Natalie said, her voice firm despite her fear. She'd watched enough legal dramas and had attended enough community meetings about immigrant rights to know this wasn't legal. You absolutely need a warrant to enter a private residence. I'm a U.S. citizen. My family are citizens. You have no authority to enter my home without a warrant or my consent. I'm calling my lawyer right now. She pulled out her phone, her hands shaking, trying to find the number for the ACLU that she'd saved after a neighborhood association meeting about knowing your rights. Morrison's face on the camera showed his patience exhausted. Ma'am, you have 3 seconds to open this door. 3, 2, 1. Natalie was still looking at her phone when she heard the battering ram hit her door. The sound was enormous, shocking, like an explosion in the quiet morning. Jasmine screamed. Kennedy started crying. The doorbell camera captured everything. The first hit that cracked the door frame, the second that splintered the wood around the lock, the third that sent the door flying inward, slamming against the wall. 4 agents poured into the house like a tactical assault team, weapons drawn, shouting commands that overlapped into an incomprehensible wall of sound. Hands up. Don't move. Get on the ground. Show me your hands. Natalie stumbled backward, her hands raised, her phone clattering to the floor. My daughters. Please, my daughters are here. They're just kids. Jasmine and Kennedy were in the hallway, both with their hands up, both crying, both terrified by the armed agents who had just broken into their home. The girls were still in their pajamas, Jasmine in shorts and a tank top, Kennedy in an oversized t-shirt, standing frozen in shock. Morrison and his partner Agent Rebecca Tran moved through the house systematically, weapons raised, clearing rooms like they were expecting armed resistance. The other 2 agents, Agent Luis Mendez and Agent Sarah Kim, kept Natalie and the girls in the living room, ordering them to sit on the couch with their hands visible. Please, Natalie said, her voice breaking. Please, you're scaring my daughters. We're American citizens. This is our home. Why are you doing this? We'll determine citizenship status, Tran said, returning from searching the bedrooms. Right now, everyone stays where they are. The doorbell camera, still recording from the now broken doorway, captured neighbors beginning to gather on the sidewalk, drawn by the commotion. One elderly man, Mr. Kowalski from next door, was on his phone, presumably calling 911. A woman across the street was recording on her cell phone. Morrison stood in the center of the living room, holstering his weapon, his body camera recording from his chest. Who else lives in this house? Just us, Natalie said, trying to keep her voice steady for her daughters who were clinging to each other on the couch. Me and my 2 daughters. We're all U.S. citizens. I can show you birth certificates, passports, whatever you need. But you had no right to break into my home. We have authority under immigration enforcement statutes, Morrison said, pulling out a tablet. We received information that this address is housing undocumented individuals who are subject to deportation. What information? Natalie demanded, her fear giving way to anger. From who? This is my house. I've lived here for 3 years. My daughters were born at Denver Health. I work at Denver Health. We're American citizens. Whatever information you received is wrong. Tran was photographing the interior of the house with her phone. The family photos on the walls, the girls' backpacks by the door, the homework spread across the dining table. Mendez had gone upstairs and was searching through bedrooms. Kim stood by the door, her body camera recording the entire scene. Mom, I'm scared, Kennedy whispered, her 14-year-old voice small and shaking. I know, baby. It's okay. This is a mistake. We haven't done anything wrong. Natalie pulled her daughters closer, trying to provide comfort while feeling utterly helpless. I need to see identification for everyone in this house, Morrison said. Birth certificates, passports, social security cards. They're in my bedroom, Natalie said. In a file box in my closet. Can I go get them? Morrison nodded to Tran. Go with her. Natalie stood carefully, not making any sudden movements that might be interpreted as threatening, and walked to her bedroom with Tran following. The doorbell camera continued recording the scene in the living room. 2 teenage girls on a couch, 1 agent standing over them, their broken front door hanging at an angle, morning sunlight streaming through the gap. In her bedroom, Natalie's hands shook as she pulled the file box from her closet shelf. She'd organized it carefully, birth certificates in one folder, social security cards in another, passports in a third. She handed everything to Tran, who examined each document carefully. "These look legitimate," Tran said into her radio. 3 U.S. birth certificates, 3 passports, all matching the subjects. Back in the living room, Morrison was on his phone, speaking in a low voice to someone. His body language had shifted from aggressive confidence to something else. Uncertainty, maybe the beginning of realization that something had gone very wrong. Mendez came down from the upstairs, shaking his head. "Nothing. It's clearly a family residence. Kids' rooms, 1 master bedroom. No signs of multiple occupants or anything suspicious." Morrison ended his phone call, his face tight. He looked at Natalie, who had returned to the living room and immediately gathered her daughters back into her arms. "Miss Pierce, there appears to have been an error in the information we received. We're going to leave now." "An error?" Natalie's voice rose, all the fear and helplessness transforming into righteous fury. "You broke down my door. You terrorized my children. You violated every constitutional right we have. And you're going to call it an error? Ma'am, if you file a complaint with our office." "I'm not filing a complaint with your office," Natalie cut him off. "I'm calling a lawyer. I'm calling the ACLU. I'm calling every news station in Denver. You broke into my home without a warrant, with my children here, based on what you're now admitting was false information. That's not an error. That's a crime." Morrison's jaw tightened. "We were operating under Immigration Enforcement Authority. You had no authority." Natalie stood now, her body between the agents and her daughters. "The Fourth Amendment is clear. No unreasonable searches. No entry without a warrant or consent. I didn't give consent. You didn't have a warrant. You broke down my door. In front of my children. In my home where we should have been safe." The agents had no response. They filed out through the broken doorway, past the gathered neighbors, past Mr. Kowalski, who was still on the phone with someone, past the woman who was still recording everything on her cell phone. As soon as the agents' vehicles pulled away, Natalie collapsed onto the couch, shaking violently as the adrenaline left her system. Her daughters clung to her, all 3 of them crying now that the immediate danger had passed. Mr. Kowalski appeared in the broken doorway. "Natalie? Are you okay? I called the police. And I recorded everything from when they broke down your door." "Thank you," Natalie managed. Can you help me secure the door? I don't want it just hanging open." Within an hour, Natalie's small living room was full of people. Mr. Kowalski had helped prop the broken door closed and nail it temporarily into the frame. The Denver police had sent officers to take a report. A reporter from a local news station had arrived after someone posted video online. And an attorney from the Colorado ACLU had called after seeing the Ring doorbell footage that Natalie had already posted to social media with a caption that was going viral. "ICE broke into my home with no warrant, traumatized my daughters, all based on false information. This is what happens when constitutional rights don't matter." The video was devastating. It showed the agents' escalating demands, Natalie's clear refusal and assertion of her rights, and the battering ram breaking through the door. It showed 2 teenage girls in pajamas being confronted by armed agents. It showed a home invasion disguised as law enforcement. By evening, the video had been viewed over 2 million times. News stations across the country were running the story. Civil rights organizations were issuing statements. And Natalie was sitting in her living room with attorney Marcus Washington from the ACLU, giving a formal statement while her daughters stayed with neighbors because neither girl felt safe in the house anymore. "They broke my door," Natalie said, her voice hollow with exhaustion. "But they broke more than that. They broke my daughter's sense of safety. Kennedy won't sleep in her own bed. Jasmine flinches every time she hears a car door slam. We should have been safe in our own home and now we're not." The lawsuit filed 2 weeks later was unprecedented in its scope. Natalie Pierce, Jasmine Pierce and Kennedy Pierce versus United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Agent Kyle Morrison, Agent Rebecca Tran, Agent Luis Mendez, Agent Sarah Kim, and the United States government. The complaint alleged violation of Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable search and seizure, illegal entry into a private residence, assault for the violent entry, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and deprivation of rights under color of law. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The Ring doorbell footage showed everything from multiple angles as agents moved in and out of the frame. The agents' own body cameras corroborated the video. Natalie clearly refusing entry, clearly stating she was a U.S. citizen, clearly asking for a warrant, all of it ignored. Neighbor testimonies confirmed the violent entry and the terror of the children. Medical records showed Jasmine and Kennedy both being treated for anxiety and trauma following the incident. Most damning was the revelation during discovery about the information that had led to the raid. An anonymous caller had reported suspicious foreign-looking people at Natalie's address, claiming they were undocumented. The call had been made at 9:47 a.m., exactly 1 hour before the agents broke down the door. No verification had been attempted. No database checks had been run. No surveillance had been conducted. ICE had simply received an anonymous racist tip about foreign-looking people and had responded with a battering ram. The case went to trial 20 months after the incident. The federal courthouse in Denver was packed daily with families, civil rights advocates, and citizens outraged by what they'd seen in the video that had now been viewed over 50 million times worldwide. Natalie testified first, describing her life, her work as a nurse, her dedication to her daughters. She described that Tuesday morning in detail, being woken from sleep, hearing the terror in her daughters' voices, watching her door splinter, seeing armed agents storm into her home. "I kept thinking it was a mistake," she told the jury, tears streaming down her face. "I thought if I just explained, if I just showed them our documents, they would realize the error and leave. I never imagined they would break down my door. I never imagined they would do that with my children watching. We're American citizens in our own home, and we were treated like criminals." Jasmine testified, 16 now and still visibly traumatized. She described working on homework with her sister, hearing the doorbell, the escalating demands, and then the explosion of sound when the door was broken. "I thought we were going to die," she said quietly. "I thought they were going to shoot us. I had my hands up and I was crying and I thought I was going to die in my own living room." Kennedy couldn't testify in person. Her therapist advised against it, but her videotaped deposition was played for the jury. The 14-year-old described nightmares, panic attacks, an inability to feel safe anywhere. "I don't sleep in my room anymore," she said on the video, her voice small. "I sleep on the floor in my mom's room because I'm scared they'll come back." The doorbell camera footage was played multiple times during the trial. Each viewing seemed more damning than the last. The jury watched Natalie clearly assert her rights, clearly refuse consent, clearly state her citizenship. They watched agents count down and then break through the door. They watched the terror of two teenage girls confronted by armed agents in their own home. Constitutional law experts testified about the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable searches and seizures, about the absolute requirement for warrants to enter private residences, about how immigration enforcement doesn't override constitutional rights. Child psychologists testified about the trauma inflicted on Jasmine and Kennedy, about how violations of home safety affect children's development and sense of security. The defense tried to argue the agents had been following procedure, that they had authority under immigration statutes, that they had acted in good faith based on the information received. Every argument collapsed under the weight of the video evidence. What procedure allows breaking down the door of a U.S. citizen's home with no warrant? Washington asked Morrison during cross-examination. What immigration statute overrides the Fourth Amendment? What good faith exists in counting to 3 and then using a battering ram on a woman who has clearly identified herself as a citizen and clearly refused consent? Morrison had no good answers. None of the agents did. They had violated clearly established constitutional rights, had traumatized children, had destroyed a family's sense of safety, all based on an anonymous racist tip they'd never bothered to verify. The jury deliberated for 12 hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous. The defendants were liable on all counts. The damages award shocked even the attorneys who'd brought the case. $30 million total. $8 million in compensatory damages split among Natalie, Jasmine, and Kennedy for emotional distress, violation of constitutional rights, and the lasting trauma. $22 million in punitive damages, calculated to send an unmistakable message that breaking into citizens' homes without warrants would carry devastating consequences. Natalie sat quietly as the verdict was read, her daughters on either side of her, holding her hands. The money was significant. It would pay for therapy, for college, for security that she'd never felt before. But more important was the validation. A jury saying definitively that what happened was wrong, illegal, and unconscionable. All 4 agents were terminated and faced federal criminal charges for deprivation of rights under color of law. ICE announced a review of residential entry policies and promised new training guidelines for agents, though advocates noted the agency stopped short of admitting systematic failures. Internal reforms were quietly implemented requiring supervisory approval for home entries and mandatory verification of tips, changes that came too late for Natalie's family but might protect others. Natalie used part of her settlement to move to a new house. Neither she nor the girls could ever feel safe in the home that had been violated. She became a powerful advocate for Fourth Amendment rights, speaking at community forums and legal conferences about the importance of knowing and asserting constitutional protections. The doorbell footage became required viewing in law schools and law enforcement training, a perfect example of constitutional violations captured in real time and the human cost of ignoring fundamental rights. And in Denver, the broken door from Natalie Pierce's home was preserved as evidence and later donated to the Colorado Civil Liberties Union, where it hangs in their office as a reminder that no door, physical or constitutional, should be broken without proper legal authority. If you believe the Fourth Amendment protects all Americans, that homes should be sanctuaries from government intrusion, and that children should never be terrorized in their own living rooms, hit subscribe. Because Natalie's story proves that constitutional rights only matter when they're enforced, and sometimes it takes a video, a jury, and $30 million to remind the government that the word unreasonable in unreasonable search still means something.